Small countries will betray you every single time. All it takes is one phone call from Washington for them to flip against you overnight. I'm standing here in Latvia, or as I like to call it, America's northernmost colony, to show you exactly how it happens and how all these small nations are ticking time bombs waiting to go off. And in the next few minutes, we're going to give you a checklist that you can use for yourself to determine which place to go to, which are those small countries that will actually protect your wealth, that will keep their end of the bargain, and which ones will just sell you out the moment that a bigger power pressures them. Without further ado, let's get into it. Now, most people watching our channel have two main criteria when thinking about the next place to go to, which is taxes and the ease of residency. Well, that's perfectly fine. In order to understand which place is a long-term destination, you have to understand how a country thinks. And that's like a criminal, because every state is a mafia with a flag. And what do mafias do? They steal. Whether they do it openly, like in Scandinavia, where they've brainwashed the population into thinking that getting robbed is noble and extortion is for a good cause, or they hide behind their former prestige, like the UK or the US, who are milking their reputations as global financial hubs in order to attract sheep. Or you have those small rocks in the middle of the sea, like the Channel Islands or Malta, who have nothing really to offer. Nobody really wants to live there, other than some tax discounts. Different methods, it's the same outcome. It's just that you're going to be robbed through property tax, maybe some value-added tax, or heck, an inflated cost of living, and then they just tax the locals. Make no mistake, no country is a charity. It's just that the smaller you are, the more carrots you have to dangle in order to attract other people's money, whether it be through tax advantages or easy residency. But there's a catch. Just like in the movie The Godfather, every mafia has a hierarchy. And the small countries, they don't make the rules. They have to play along in order to survive. When the big boss man calls, whether it be Beijing, whether it be Moscow or Washington, they have to drop everything and get back in line. And that means all of those crypto incentives, the tax loopholes, the golden visa, if they don't play along in the bigger agenda, they will vanish overnight. So instead of jumping from one island to another, instead of running from one country to another, the better question is not which country has the lowest taxes. It is which country's laws are the safest before it sells you out. Take the small country of Latvia as the perfect case study. 20 years ago, this was pretty much the Wall Street of the Baltics. You had banks lined up in every corner, you had many financial services. In fact, we had more banks in our small country than Hong Kong and Singapore if you look at our population. Russian money was flowing in, and even though the tax rate was not zero, nobody really cared because nobody was paying it, there was no enforcement. Like it or not, but Russian money has built this beautiful city over the hundreds of years. But just like with every small country, Latvia is not in control of its destiny. And the moment that the Americans wanted to sanction the Russians, well, guess what? This country was collateral damage. They had to shoot themselves in the foot and shut off the very industry that made it rich in the first place. And what followed was a death by 1,000 cuts. The financial services industry collapsed, the banks were shut down, and the local businesses were suffocated by layers of EU regulation, and all replaced by foreign chains. Now, on the surface, Latvians, they can live and travel anywhere they want in Europe, but guess what? It drained all the best talent. Great for big fish like Germany, but the local economy, there are fewer Latvians living today than 100 years ago. That gives you the big picture. Now, the takeaway is simple. You cannot look at the local tax laws or the easy residency today because it can all change with a phone call from the boss man. You have to ask yourself, how does the perk play into the bigger agenda, and whose interests does the country serve? So how do you make sure you don't go through the same ugly debacle in some other small nation? Well, the first rule is to make sure that the local population does not have a slave-like mentality. And what I mean by that is that there are certain places in the world where the citizens instinctively push back to any master's decree. The Latvian leaders have always played the obedient servant, happy to please their foreign powers just to hold on to a few crumbs that they're given. It's the same mentality you see in many African countries who now think they are independent because they have a flag they can wave around, and yet they are literally pawns to the same colonial masters that they had 50 years ago. Just look at who's printing Western Africa's currency, Paris. The point being, that is not independence, it is servitude dressed up in a suit, because the best slave is the one who thinks he is free, and therefore you want to go for the opposite. You want to go for those small countries that used to run an empire of their own, because that historic pride is going to give them a stronger spine. Best case example is Georgia, which used to rule over the Caucasus, and today it has some of the most innovative laws, tax-friendly laws. It used to be crypto-friendly up until recently, and it's bringing in foreigners, including Russians, who attacked them 15 years ago. Serbia, another example where you can get citizenship and it more or less makes its own policy outside of the scope of the EU. It was actually one of those countries that liberated itself from the Nazis without any Allied intervention, and that resilience still stands today. Don't get it twisted. We're not going to kid ourselves that they won't get pushed around by some bullies, but at least they will not be pushovers. And this brings us into rule number 2. Make sure that the tax and residency perks align with the bigger power interests. And what do I mean by that? Well, look at Panama. Just like Latvia, its offshore industry almost got blown up a few years ago after the Panama paper leaks. But notice the difference. Latvia's banks got all eradicated and shut down by the Americans, and yet Panama's are still standing. Why is that? Because Panama plays a bigger role in the global agenda. No pun intended. It's the main route how the CIA funnels and launders their drug money from Colombia. The narcos, they put in the cash, the real estate layers it, and then sends it out to Switzerland, London, or even US banks. Basically, you saw that beautiful skyline in Panama City? Well, that's narco money over there. The point being, the bigger lesson is that there are certain countries which are the chosen ones, the ones that the elites use, and you want to plug yourself into them because their advantages will last longer. Don't go for some country where no important person uses it, such as, I don't know, Vanuatu. Their passports, their companies are pretty much useless in today's day and age. Essentially, there's a hierarchy. At the top of the food chain, you'll have some of the Channel Islands, maybe Bermuda, the Caymans. That's where London's shadow elite put their money. Of course, it'll cost you an arm and a leg to operate those structures, so if you want to go for something cheaper, then you have some of the Emirates in the UAE, Panama, of course, or if you're a crypto holder, then El Salvador may be a longer-term bet. Now, everything depends on location, location, location. And that is rule number 3. I'd even say the most important rule out here. After all, there is a reason why all the Eastern countries are so paranoid. Flat borders with Russia, centuries of invasion from foreign powers, and paranoid people usually make bad, short-term decisions. There's a reason why mountainous Switzerland and Liechtenstein have become the wealth parking lots in the world, and there is a reason why Latin American countries, an entire ocean away from major conflicts, the furthest from any World War III scenario, have some of the most relaxed governments. As long as they pay Uncle Sam their cut, they're pretty much able to make any tax loopholes or residency deals. And the culture matches the geography. In South America, you have forests, you have mountains, deserts. All of that is terrain that is very difficult to control for those local governments. And that rebellious streak, it has been going on for hundreds of years. Heck, they even have a word for it over there, avispado, which is basically cunning, quick-witted, always finding a way around the system. Now, I'm not saying there aren't any trade-offs. You may have to deal with a bit of bureaucracy, even corruption in places like Paraguay or Uruguay, but that is the cost of freedom. I mean, after all, guns are legal in many of the countries, and even if they're not, the locals don't really care. They have their own version of neighborhood watches, which is a good thing because the governments know very well not to go full draconian. If not, they'll get a pushback that may even lead to a civil war. And finally, rule number 4, I know it'll sound rough, but make sure the place you're going to has at least some standard of living. Because listen, as a Westerner, you are used to some comfort, whether it be the AC, fast internet, Amazon deliveries, or theater on a Friday, Saturday night. Guess what? If you park yourself in some penthouse in, I don't know, Cambodia, the locals do not live that way. You're going to stand out, you're gonna have a target on your back. And the funny thing is that all of those imports to get to that Western style of comfort, they will cost more in those third world countries simply because their import duties and tariffs are a lot higher. There are fewer service providers and supply chains are limited, so you may pay triple for something that you took for granted back home. Do not just calculate the rent and the local food prices. You have to take into consideration the entire life package. The goal is to strike a balance. Because let's be real, you'll never find the country that checks all the boxes. You're gonna have to compromise on certain aspects that don't matter to you as much as others. For us, the most important factor is geography, because the less that a foreign power can influence local politics, well, the more stable the laws are going to be in the long term. Does not mean that the small country won't have to play along with the boss man. I mean, after all, Machiavelli, he put it best, the weak will always have to ally themselves with the strong, for if they remain neutral, they will fall prey to the victor. However, you want those countries that do not instinctively say, how high should I jump? But rather, how will this jump land me higher? Anyway, that's it for today's presentation. I've made a previous video on how CBI programs work in practice. It may help you out with your decisions where to move in the future, but if you enjoy this type of content, you can share it with a friend or comment down below. I'll be seeing you though next time, and until then, bye-bye.